Welcome back. This is Daybreak. Thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at IU. Abdikadir Diana Gishengo is the national coordinator, the Institute of Social Accountability. George Murugara is the lawmaker representing the Raka constituency, as well as the chair of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee of the National Assembly. And Franklin Mukwanja is the executive director at the Center for Multi-Party Democracy. Yes, Diana.
Where were we? I think we were discussing how this government has been treating the rule of law, and the fuel levy has been raised, but I do recall as well the Social Health Insurance Fund and the Act, the Finance Act, the CDF. If we are to go into money matters, a ruling that says who can receive money. It is the national government and the county governments. And immediately the president took power. His memoranda, what did it contain? NG? CDF. So if you look at all this, increasingly you find that we have a ruling class that would like to operate outside the constitution. And increasingly, it is becoming very despotic and tyrannical. That is why people can be abducted for for over 3 weeks, and it is a non-issue. A member of a county assembly is missing, and life goes on. We are yet to identify the bodies that were found in Kware. When this happens, it is a different form of statehood. It is statehood that forgets at the core of the Kenyan state is the Kenyan people, who are not supposed to be helpless when they disappear and the government institutions do not respond. They're supposed to become faceless as well. What drives a nation is the blood of its people. When that is threatened, all organs must stop and reflect. We cannot have people in authority continually circumventing the rule of law to protect the little power they have. From who? From where? If the people are not safe, the members of the executive, members of independent commissions, the judiciary, parliament should even feel more unsafe because they are there on behalf of the sovereign power of the people. Yet the government, I don't know, not just for contempt of court, look at what happened to that young man in Multimedia University. He was actually running, didn't break anything, and a group of police officers decide the little force that we have, this is where we are directing it. Franklin has said the fish rots from the head. Mm-hmm. Once it rots, the tail will even be more rotten in trying to conform to the head. Because of the rot at the top and the disregard for the constitution, what we are seeing are very many other avenues that are now being brought forward to use other means. We are contracting debt as if they are just debt contracts, not sovereign debt, outside the law. That is what has happened with Kenya Kwanza. Jubilee started this. We are now on acceleration mode. ODM has joined them. So at this point, one thing we will note, we are operating in a despotic government. At this point, the judiciary cannot be restraining itself. Okay. They have a higher duty. They have a higher duty to protect the people and the constitution.
Yes, Murugara.
Two things. One, let me deny that I would be holding brief for the government or for the majority. As an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, I stand for the rule of law to the letter. But the sword has both sides. When we hear this side also, let's hear the other side. Both of them possibly may be in a contradistinction, but they must be heard. That's number one. Number two, I think let's not make sweeping statements that the government does not comply with the law, the government is going overboard in doing its things, including borrowing. I think we have to be specific. We have not exceeded our debt ceiling. The law that is in force, we are still within the provisions of the amendment we made in Parliament on how our debt ceiling is to be determined. We have not gone past the percentage that we allowed, moved away from absolute...
But you borrowed more, isn't it?
Yeah. No. What we are saying is, in that particular period of time, when we passed the law, we are actually within that. We have not exceeded it.
You talked about that's the debt ceiling.
The debt ceiling, which is now determined by a percentage of GDP and not specific figures, which used to be in the old law. That percentage... The
point is then, Honorable Murugara, that you borrowed more when you came to power, and you pledged to the Kenyan people that you will end the borrowing, the begging bowl culture.
I agree, but unfortunately, sometimes you're forced by circumstances to borrow. You know very well the deficits we have in our budgets are huge. Kenyans are anxious, like now. We want to see development in the country. So you look at your means, you look at your GDP, you look at your law. If it allows you to borrow, then you have to go with the bar. If it doesn't, then you have to look for other means and ways of raising income or revenue for purposes of development.
But Kenyans also told you, parliamentarians and those in leadership, that please stop misappropriation of our money. That way we can seal the loopholes and fund ourselves without necessarily borrowing.
Absolutely misappropriation. First and foremost, we have to go to the specifics. How are we misappropriating the money? The biggest problem we have in the country is recurrent expense. So when we pay Kenyans their salaries and what have you, to the tune of almost 60%, we are misappropriating the money. Is that what we are being told? That these people should all go home, not get their pay? We should not recruit, which is what we are trying to say. In other words, there is a freeze on recruitment in the country of civil servants. We have young children in the streets who are demonstrating, saying, give us jobs. How do you balance the two? In whose interest do you determine? Misappropriation by employing, or listen to these young people saying, where we can, we will try to create as many jobs as we can, including the contemplation we have of trying to reduce the retirement age so that we can accommodate the young people. I'm sorry, all this comes into play when you look at which side is weightier than the other. As regards to CDF, again...
let me just clarify on the debt anchor. And we are relying on government documents. Parliament passed a debt to GDP anchor of 55%. As at January, document produced by Treasury indicated that our debt is at 68% of the GDP.
Which is some 30% more.
Already higher than the set anchor. Yes. Nothing has been done to revise that. Therefore, we are borrowing already outside the set parameters of Parliament. And that was in January. Since then, debt has grown significantly. So when we say we are borrowing outside the debt anchor, yes, that is even expressed. It is there in Treasury document. We expect Parliament to be seeking very, very high levels of compliance. We've not even gone to the nitty-gritty. Government document.
Let him finish his point. Because you are also making another point here.
It has plus or minus 10%. So if there is anything above what is allowed, then it's that the 3% possibly, which we need to look at, I must confess, because by the time we passed that law, we were within the limits. And if anything has been done, then Parliament needs to look at the law and rectify what needs to be done or declare what has been done to be outside the law so that the position of Parliament is made clear. CDF, I have no idea why she carries the notion that there has been disobedience of any law, including the Constitution, because it is determined that division of revenue goes to two governments, the national government and the county government. CDF comes from the national government portion or ratio of the division of revenue. And Parliament itself and the executive national government administration has made the constituency to be actually a development center, a center of development, just like the counties on their own, the sub-counties and the rest of it. So members of Parliament do not have any role to play in CDF anymore, not even as patrons or whatever they would give to themselves. It's only that it's done in a constituency where I was elected. Demands have been made upon me by the citizens of that constituency, and therefore my face must be seen. Otherwise, you would hardly see an MP going to court for misappropriation of funds, stealing or whatever it's called, because he does not touch that money in any way. It has a very good system of its own administration, which we must carry through.
Yes, I think the jury is out there, and Kenyans will make up their mind on this debate, whether Honorable Mrugara is making convenient arguments for the sake of it, or really addressing the critical issues. Let's even move away from the controversial human rights violations by the police and go to 3 or 4 aspects that affect Kenyans on the rule of law. One of them, look, we are in the 3rd month of this current financial year. National Treasury has yet to disburse, close to 100 billion shillings to counties. How are we going to have service delivery? What is the reason, the excuse? We have no division of revenue bill. There's no legal framework to do it. The Member of Parliament is here. That is the rule of law. Look at the way the police behaved with the press and the civil society. Free press and an independent civil society that functions within specific tenets are essential, to promoting the rule of law and hold government account. But look, journalists, one was shot in Nakuru, others were battered. Do we have any progress in that regard? The journalist is being threatened today. Look at basic issues like land and property rights. We have a lot of weak enforcement. Historical injustices are rarely addressed. Land grabbing is ongoing business. All these things are straining the rule of law, and we have to continue looking at it. The reforms that the House looks at, the courts have indicted, and I was with Honorable Mrugara yesterday in an event. He decried the issue of public participation because they have only been paying lip service to it. These are issues of rule of law that affect the ordinary citizen. Maybe it becomes a little bit too sensitive when we talk about the fish rotting from the head and looking at the big boys and girls, disregarding the rule of law, which is the taproot of good governance. He will naturally have politically correct, in my view, responses. But these other issues, Honorable Mrugara, basic issues as land and property rights that are straining the rule of law, disbursing resources to counties so that they can serve the people, the free press, civil society protesting peaceably, public participation. Are there issues we can also really have a contest about and make convenient arguments? I think we are not serving Kenyans when we do that.
All right. And Honorable Mrugara, let's talk about the big boys here, and let's start off with the president.
Before the big boys, good to clarify 2 things. Number one,
yes, please.
Again, I've cautioned my colleagues here not to make sweeping statements. They are very easy to make, but the specifics is what would lack.
For example?
We do land grabbing. How is that sanctioned by anybody, any government officer? Anybody who has grabbed the land is the
role to protect land and property rights is government. Are there not incidents of land grabbing?
Absolutely.
Are there incidents of people not losing their property?
Absolutely.
Unquestioned.
But we'll only blame the government for land grabbing if the government sanctioned it. The problem is, it's an illegality. It's an offense. You cannot say the government should stop commission of crimes. It can try to prevent, but it cannot stop because criminals are all over. They will do it, but once they do it, we bring them to book, take them to court, and they are convicted. Due process takes place, that proceeds. That's number one. Okay. Number two, the cry on release of funds to the counties, which I say by now we should actually be doing. But remember, we lost the finance bill.
Because you didn't listen to Kenyans.
Just hold on. No. We listened to Kenyans to a great extent. And those who said we didn't listen, today are saying, actually, maybe we had also not looked at this bill. It was a good bill. Let's leave that for now and say, we just did a supplementary the other day in mid-August. So surely the various revenues, the various statutes that are required to be in place are in place now so that counties can get their share of that divisible revenue. That's number one.
All right.
So it may be too early to blame the government. I'm not trying to blame to defend the government, but sometimes you have to be real and practical. And I like this because we are now hearing from the very same people who used to say all these things. They are bad, they're supposed to be done, they're supposed to be done. Today, they are the ones to answer why is there a delay in the release of funds to the county.
So you're talking about John Buddy.
So it is now, reality is not that these things are very easy when it's said from the opposition side. When you come to implement, you know that there's something called due process, there's something called the law, which you must comply with.
All right. So
and this is what you are trying to do.
Let's talk about the due process and the law then. Yes. And I'll drive us back to January the 4th, 2024. President William Ruto was, talking about the big boys that Franklin mentioned, was in Nyandarua County for a church function and visibly frustrated by the delayed construction of a road. And he said the following, watu wa Nyandarua, ile barabara ya Ndonyo Njeru Ihithe, mnataka tujenge ama mnataka tungoje maamuzi ya mahakama? Judiciary wanasema tusijenge, mnataka nijenge? Then the crowd responded, yes. Bwana PS, weka pesa hiyo barabara tuanze kujenga. Kwa sababu the judiciary must be answerable and submit itself to the people of Kenya. So, big boy number 2, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, here's what he said when the Supreme Court ruled on the presidential petition. Shame on the judiciary of this country. We will talk until the constitution of this country gives power to the people. The constitution does give power to the people under Article 1, apparently. As people of Kenya, we will not be a coward. We are not going to allow another dictator to come to this country. We will not allow the judiciary to become a dictator. And he said this judicial thuggery must end. We will not be a coward. Nyayo, he meant Moi, tried it and we resisted, and the courts cannot allow another dictator in the country. It seems what followed thereafter was also the outlandish and unorthodox means and the expression that was expressed by many. I mean, this is unwelcome. When you talk about the due process and the law as an advocate, this is at odds with the offices they hold and the platform that they hold as political leaders.
But these are not lawyers.
They are not lawyers.
These are politicians.
The President of the Republic of Kenya, Honorable Murugara, as an advocate, is the employee number 1 who must adhere by the principles of good governance. You agree?
I agree with you. But listen to what he has said. Let me ask the people what they want, which is what we are being told to do as Parliament. Go to the people, ask them what do they want. It doesn't matter what I, Gitonga Murugara, MP for Tharaka, elected by the people, wants. Let the people tell us. So if that is the trajectory we are taking, then the president was not wrong. He went to the people themselves to say, what do you people want? This road, or we wait for the court's due process?
So
right?
which outweighs the other, in your view? So, okay, let's get it clear.
This is what I'm grappling with also.
I'll give you the time to respond. Okay, allow me to ask you this. Allow me to ask you this. As a practitioner of the law and an advocate at that, which aspect outweighs the other here? The response by the crowd that they want this road done because there is a process to that, because there is a funding aspect, there is the conceptualization of the idea, then the contract is being given, the process is followed, the money is put in, and then the road is constructed. Or the president, who is supposed to be employee number 1, who adheres to court orders and who himself is not above the law, being a state property, that he must live by the principles of good governance and constitutionalism.
Let's begin with the court order. I don't believe there was any court order there. Somebody had gone to court to challenge the process. And he was saying, look, this process is going to take too long while we are actually supposed to be building this road. Let's go to the people, because all of you Kenyans, the sovereign power of the republic vests with the people. So they are supreme to everything. It doesn't matter what my conception is regarding a good law in Parliament. If the people say it is bad, they don't want it, that becomes supreme. So that is exactly what was happening in that demonstration. That what do the people themselves want? And this is what he's saying. Yesterday, I decried what standards or what amounts to good public participation, sufficient, adequate, and what have you. The truth is, public participation should not be cosmetic. It should be real. We listen to the people, and we take into consideration the views they give to us. For example, now, wherever we go, whether in the parliament or in the courts, if those people decry they do want that road, which possibly was passing through some protected area of some forest, and they want it that way, the question will be, you'll be asked is, you to have ruled otherwise, to have taken a different decision, what were you relying on? Were you trying to overthrow the supreme will of the people who actually gave you the power? So we have all this to think about. And this is as a result of the Constitution of 2010 and also our own liberalization.
Yes.
We are now more liberal than we were those days, which Honorable Raila Odinga is quoting there, when we had the problems with everybody who came to power. But for Honorable Raila, he was just not happy with some decision of the court. He made an observation out there as a politician. And he may have said what he said. I'm not trying to justify it. He was aggrieved. And every Kenyan has a right to criticize a judgment which is not in your favor, provided you do not act in a manner contemptuous of the courts. To say, look, if the law is bad, we will amend the law. We will also go to the next court of appeal if the matter is appealable. That is what the rule of law and due process entails. So, you have it yourself. Who is supreme? When the people say yes, can the parliament say no? When the people say yes, can the courts say no? The executive goes without gainsaying. They cannot have a word when the people have spoken. In the pretext of disobeying court orders? If there is a court order to be obeyed, the court order must be obeyed until it is set aside by the courts. But I do not think the January incident had a court order which had to be obeyed. That's number one. Number two, we'll also have something moot to discuss. There may be a court order that is perpetual. It is against the will of the people because it was obtained by one person and a possibly ex parte. Can we also pour oils on it by talking to the people so that we know what their stand is? The sovereign power of Kenyans is vested in the Kenyans themselves. And Kenyans gave unto themselves a constitution which provides for the procedures of what to do if you are an aggrieved party, which includes getting back to the people through a referendum, is it? And they have said this. Even where the constitution is inconsistent with the will of the people is supreme. It overrides the constitution. They have said it themselves. So you can see how intriguing it is when it comes to what extent can you challenge the will of the people. So if the people are not happy with what is happening, they themselves will pronounce we are not happy, and we therefore have to change this clause in the constitution. Sometimes you are told you have to go to a referendum, other times you're told you have to go to your elected representatives so that they do it the way it's supposed to be done. How do you qualify events of June 25th when the Kenyan people were dissatisfied with you parliamentarians and came to the House, you scampered for safety, all of the MPs? Was that Article 1 in action? Unfortunately, we cannot say Kenyan people. They were citizens. If it was Kenyan people, they would have actually overrun their own parliament and declared themselves sovereign and do with themselves what they wanted. There were people, we were a bit concerned whether what they did was within the constitution itself, the rule of law. It's a section of people, not Kenyans. Because if you say Kenyans, I would ask you whether we had also done it in Tharaka, whether we had done it in Alego Soga, whether we had done it everywhere else. It's a section of the people, and it may have been contrary to the law, because these three institutions, which are actually independent, they are also the supreme organs of our constitution and our government. All right. Sometimes have to be protected. Yes, Diana.
I want to go back, and it's a good thing to hear from Honorable Murugara that the will of the people is supreme. But without a doubt, it is always exercised within a process. Because if that was true, and we go to his constituency, he becomes unpopular and the will of the people is before the 5-year term, we do not want this guy, we just can't remove him. There is a process of that particular removal in the form of recall.
Which they have made different.
Yes, and it is, remember, the people are supreme, but they must comply with that process. Therefore, even the president, even when in a rally, and especially this is a rally, it is not even documented that this, again, it would follow the same argument of what happened in Parliament. A section of the people, probably mobilized by the president, lieutenants on the ground in Nyandarua, showed up in a rally and told him, they were asked a hypothetical question, munataka barabara ama mahakama? Baraba? That is not due process. That is not due process. And the will of the people is best protected when we adhere to the highest standards of the rule of law, where the spirit, every time as he thinks, the president actually had a duty to explain, the court, I am told, injuncted us because of ABCD. This decision, it's okay to criticize. This decision weighs on me because I would like to deliver this road, but I have heard that apparently the contract were not open and transparent. And again, those are our values. That is the obligation that a president has on the sovereign people. And today, I'm saying, Honorable, you can see, you quote something, he goes back. He has to remind himself the law, the president's responsibility, by virtue of the power that he holds, is even higher, and together with, you've called them what? The Right Honorable, you've called them what? Big boys.
Yes.
As Franklin pointed out, the big boys.
Those people, their duty, because these are people you even hear people saying, I'm not going to read the law, they have read. So if they disinform, their duty is higher than mine as a citizen.
Moral duty.
No,
it's not legal.
No, for power, for constitutional power, all the articles, all the chapters of the Constitution that establish constitutional offices, the first thing is what guides you. It is not a moral duty. It is a constitutional duty that ought to be linked to Chapter 6. Whenever a public leader goes against the Constitution, if we are serious about the will of the people, it is the highest offense to what binds us as a people.
But okay, yes, hang on. Yes,
and like they ought to immediately step aside. If they are being guided by morality and not the Constitution, they need to step aside.
Yeah. I would read the lips of Honorable Murugara as Diana spoke. That you actually need a moral bearing even to obey the law, right? Because the law is there. You can choose, like we have seen leaders in the present and previous regimes choosing to disobey the law. That means that their moral compass is not there. But let me put this to Kenyans, that like the proverbial ostrich, the leaders can choose to dip their head in the sand, but they are exposed. The issue of the capture of public institutions is very clear to all and sundry as Kenyans. The attempts to undermine justice is quite clear to Kenyans. The push and the appetite to weaken the rule of law is very, very glaring. And we can see that the powerful people in this country want to act with impunity. When Honorable Murugara refers to the very Kenyan, very issue-based, very tribeless protests by the young people in the recent past, that it was just a section of Kenyans, I find it a little bit clever in the way he wants to approach this debate. But we must be clear in stating, this Honorable Murugara, that Kenyans, the train left the station. And unless the political parties reorient themselves and leaders like you to shift to more programmatic political parties and address these clear issues that Kenyans are, raising, there is a challenge going ahead in terms of how politics should be
Pragmatic
done.
Parties?
Programmatic
Programmatic parties. Political parties?
Yes. I mean, being very clear on what are you proposing as a political party, UDA, on your interventions on the economy? What are you saying in terms of education, in terms of health? The discussions of mobilizing Kenyans along ethnic lines, the discussions of having elite political settlement, like the way we have seen the response to the protests against the economic policies by the ruling party, I think those are things that we must begin putting behind if we have to move this country to the next level. And as long as the conversations are convenient and trying to belittle what the young people did and explain conveniently, I think we're in for a rude shock.
Sorry, I think I need to make myself clear here. I'm not trying to say what the young people were doing was wrong. They were purely supposed to demonstrate, protected by the police and everybody else, peacefully, without any destruction to property or life. If that was overstepped, then it was unfortunate. And for sure, it was overstepped by a section, not all of them. And the youngsters actually distanced themselves from the criminal elements who broke into parliament and destroyed the property. To that extent, it rests there. But when he talks about programmatic parties, I don't know which parties those ones are, because every party is supposed to have its own programs. It's supposed to go to the people, speak to the people, win power, and rule. That is the essence of every party. So there, I don't know. But again, I keep on saying, the supreme will of the people, which every politician talks about, is if you do not do this as the person in power, we will ask the people whether this is what they want or they do not want, including what they said about recall. There is a provision in the Constitution on recall. Nobody has made it difficult. It's express. It's only that it's also not supposed to be abused. You can't just walk over to Tharaka and tell the people of Tharaka, Murugara is not a good leader. Recall him so that you can elect another one. There has to be a due process. And there is a due process in everything that is done, failure to which, even when it comes to the people are not happy with their government, there is a due process to follow to remove that government from power. Otherwise, they would have to do it extrajudicially, which means a coup, and the coups, to a great extent,
have proven disastrous.
Are also not lawful in accordance with the law that is in place that time, until the coup makers themselves make their own laws to legitimize that coup.
All right. And Honorable Murugara, you including and other state officials, first, the Kenyan people expect you to, it's a demand to respect, uphold, and safeguard the Constitution and the rule of law.
Absolutely.
As well as promoting and enhancing the unity in the country. All right. And that's why there are a lot of checks on the powers of the office of the presidency, not, of course, limited to President William Ruto, because we will have many presidents. We had presidents, of course, before him. And in practice, then it means, despite these checks and balances, he still wields significant legal and political powers that he can exercise as the commander-in-chief. We had seen utter contempt for the rule of law during the Kenyatta presidency. The president himself, on the 1st of September, when the Supreme Court nullified his re-election, went to Bama Market here in Kamukunji constituency and called the landed judges of the Supreme Court Wakora Network. It was then thereafter an expression which was thematically picked up by then Jubilee Party leaders, including the Deputy President. Is what we are dealing with in regards to our constitutional dispensation. And as an advocate, a case of a constitutional setup that we have without constitutionalism, where we live by the very same principles that ought to be the turbocharging of how we have to live, how we have to govern ourselves, the processes that ought to underpin our progress as a society.
I have said it before. Do not call it disobedience of court orders when it comes to political statements that are made in rallies. President Kenyatta did not disobey the Supreme Court order nullifying his election. He was not happy. He may have used words that were a little bit unpalatable to describe the judges and everybody else. It's expected of anybody who is aggrieved by a decision that is touching
a little bit, or
the truth is,
would I be fair if I call you a crook if you are a judge?
I can assure you,
presiding over my matter, if I felt aggrieved as a party, hang on, Honorable Murugara, you will proceed. I'll give you the time to respond. If you were a judge who was presiding over a matter where I was a party and I feel aggrieved, maybe because of the determination that you made, would it be fair if I call you a crook?
It may not be very fair, but you may also call me something slightly or similar to a crook in a different way. I can assure you of one thing. Even the courts themselves have not been very kind to leaders, all right? Not once, not twice, possibly, these politicians have been called gangsters. Because it's natural.
But the judges or the courts or the judiciary never called politicians
in their judgments,
gangsters.
If you read some of the writings in there, they are not very attractive.
For example?
When they're talking about this. I'll give you an example later. But let me go to this one.
Yes.
President Kenyatta did not disobey the order, all right? Because he would have simply done one thing, sworn himself into power and continued to rule the country. He didn't. Instead, he may have used those words when he was out there in public. And you know, sometimes we complain when these words are used in the courts. Contempt of court is usually on the face of the court. And out there in a political rally, you may make any statements because you are not held possibly to strict account by those concerned. He used those words, but he obeyed the order. We went to a re-election, and he was re-elected, which means we actually complied with the court orders. The rule of law is premised on the Constitution,
yes,
the Ruto, the supreme law of the country. It is exercised by the three independent government entities. That is the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. But with the checks and balances between themselves. And that must be understood, that each of them checks the other. And there are various ways of doing it.
Yes.
The president is checked by the courts through court orders. The president checks the judges through some of the appointments done to the Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, and also implementation of government policy as far as that is concerned. The legislature makes laws and also does budgets to the other two. So this interdependence must also be noticeable, that they are not entirely independent. They have an element of interdependence which brings them together so that they are able to work as one unit,
okay,
and that unit is called the government.
But if you look at Parliament, if we are to audit the Parliament of the Republic of Kenya,
yes,
you are largely so keen on supplicating at the feet of the president or the executive. You have fully eroded your institutional power and oversight mandate. You have been granted the mandate by the Kenyan people to even impeach a sitting president. And this has fully compromised your ability to function, is it? For instance, just let's take the case in point of the Finance Bill 2024. All parliamentarians were dead against the decry of Kenyans. They told you, look, our pay slips are thinning. Your own Treasury CS, the former Professor Njuguna Ndungu, said that more taxation does not necessarily mean more revenues. Yeah. Let's slow down on this. The Kenyan people said the cost of living is high. There were plans, of course, you guys had with regards to a fertilizer program to boost production of food. But you were dead against it simply because the State House said this is the way, and you never question when the president speaks. How do you speak to this gross erosion of your independence as per as a house in checking the executive instead of being what many Kenyans today deem as an appendage?
Is it State House that said we have to go this way, or it was the government and the ruling party?
On the 18th of June, okay, let me give you the chronological event. All right, Honorable Muragara. On the 18th of June, you had a parliamentary group meeting at State House.
Yeah.
You discussed the finance bill.
So we discussed.
You removed some aspects because of the public participation. The chair was there. He communicated, Kuria Kimani. On the 21st, many of your leaders said, look, you guys are protesting unnecessarily. Why come to the demonstrations about Uber, eat chicken and leave the city center? On 23rd, the president spoke in Nyandarua County. He said, our young people have raised fundamental issues on core governance and we must have this discussion. 2 days later, they overran Parliament. You failed to listen for the 3 days when the protests were intense and they had driven home very fundamental point that, look, life is hard. We are unable to get education. Our pay slips are slimming, those of their parents. That's why we are on the street. Basically, they said they're hopeless in life, but you parliamentarians said we rather listen to State House and the executive rather than what the people of Kenya were telling you.
Now, have we listened to the people of Kenya as we speak today?
In your view, did you?
We must have listened to them, number one, because we agree with the president when he said, I would not sign this bill into law because it has questions. And it was not due to lack of public participation. You have actually confirmed that we removed most of those items from that bill when people said this is not good. The reason why actually the bill was opposed was because there was determined effort to oppose it. And said, sorry, this must be lost. Reject the bill. Today, those who said reject the bill are saying it is not as bad as they thought it was. In fact, they're saying, in one way or the other, most of the items that were in that bill must find their way into the law. Because it was that bill which was the anchor of development for this financial year. How does the government move ahead without raising that revenue? There are many instances that we can talk about.
Okay.
The inversion of parliament, because that is what it was, really, it was regrettable. I don't think that was the best way to communicate their issues. But we have also learned our lesson. That the young people must be listened to. Not only the young people, every Kenyan must be listened to from time to time when we are making laws, when we are making policies, when we are making decisions.
Okay.
And that cannot be withdrawn because it also stems from our constitution. That the sovereign power of the people rests with themselves.
Okay.
So let's listen to them.
Yes.
And that's why we are saying sometimes we may go to the incident of January where you ask in a political rally, what do you people want from me? Or what do you want from this decision? Or what do you want from that development project, which is supposed to be ongoing?
Yes, Diana.
Parliament has really failed us because there's no, all legislative authority of the will of the people lies with Parliament. Actually, what happened with reject the finance bill? Maybe one day when we get to live the spirit of the Constitution, I may be an MP, but I would hate that I have to go to State House and the president says, go and remake the law. When you have full powers of legislation. The protest may have started on the most significant ones, June 25th, but they started June 12th. Public participation throughout and even in the preceding year, Kenyans were very clear that you need to stop raising more revenue because our problem is not revenue. It is how the revenue we have, little or much, is utilized. And research has shown that Kenya has enough revenue that is significantly higher than all our neighbors. So one, when Parliament, and when you read, you must first read the Constitution, then we go to the optics of PGs, parliamentary group meetings, because that is where we lose it completely. I can assure you, members of Parliament have relatives who told them, please, e-tax hatuwezani nayo. Why is it that they forget their constitutional power, their ultimate employers are the people, and they rush to either the president or the leader of Azimio the Right Honorable Prime Minister, it is actually embarrassing. Yes. And it takes away the honor and dignity of the August House. What happened in State House that day, I was actually waiting for the day Parliament goes back, or we strike out 1, 2, 3. Surely, did it have to get to that? And some of us appeared before all those committees, the Finance and Planning Committee, and they were very clear. We can see what we are doing to the economy, and it is even affecting the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. Okay. When Professor Ndungu was leaving, he said the same thing. So who is this that needed the 300 billion? By all means. It has been taken away now. The money from the Finance Act of 2023 is gone. Were we on a lull of development before these two taxation laws were introduced? No, we have never been. Our biggest problem is that we continue to refuse to take the hard decision of dealing with thieves in government and very, very expensive borrowing. Yes, yes. That is what, and I hope the message of Kenyans in rejecting the bill, it was to tell government, you have the wrong priorities on this. Focus on expenditure. Yeah.
Yes, Franklin.
Yeah, two things. One is I sometimes empathize with our elected leaders because one of the challenges is it's either executive overreach or Parliament has especially National Assembly has accepted to be captured. And if it's that it's captured, then we have to look at the quality of the citizen that chose the quality of the leaders that we have. Because then the constitutional guidelines are very clear that executive is outside of parliament and, parliament is not in the executive. That's clear. So there is no reason why citizens should entertain elected leaders who go to them and explain that I have to sing the song of the present-day executive for me to bring development. It is their duty to oversight the executive and not to be strange bedfellows with the executive. But I think it's just down to the quality of the citizens, because the Kenyan problem is all of us standing before the mirror and seeing that problem in front of the mirror. And that is exactly the issue. Honorable Mrugara may want to evade the issue of programmatic political parties with a very simplistic explanation, but he knows what I'm pointing at. There is no significant difference in the political parties we have, to the extent that when he was vetting Honorable Mbadi, he explained it, that he's very at home with the bottom-up, economic transformation agenda, because he does not see any difference between ODM. Then what is the reason for elections? Because Kenyans need to have credible, viable alternative, all right? They need to be a minority that presents that alternative voice, that makes, some policy propositions that have a departure from the government. And that is what young people are really asking for. Why should we participate in a process that we do not see the difference? It's all gray. There are no black and white on these issues. So we want this conversation to move to real critical issues. And dodging that question of programmatic political parties, because the old order is a beneficiary of mobilizing politics along ethnic lines, things that Honorable Mugara was also part of. When they begin talking about Mrima and this is the spokesperson and that, it's all the same old order that where the young people are protesting against. And I think we must empathize that the system we chose for ourselves, the presidential with majority and minority, is a problem because it's raiding in nature. A president with such a system wants to capture, and if you are a policy advisor to President William Ruto, I will advise him to capture parliament, because how do you pursue your agenda? You want your absolute majority so that you can pursue it. But then it is down to the citizen to demand accountability from the elected leaders so that they can have the moral bearing to understand their functions and duties.
Yes, Honorable Murugara, before we sample the feedback.
Thank you very much. I think finally we are in agreement that the problem may not be with the parliament alone, but may also be with Kenyans, including these two colleagues
who are eligible
because
voters.
Because believe me, one, they are eligible to become members of parliament. and they'll go through parties. She will come through UDA, you come through ODM. And they would not be any different from John Badi, from Murugara, from anyone. Because a party is a party, it has its own line of thinking, and you have to go by it. If you don't, the consequences we may not discuss here, but they are there and they know them. Number two, they also cast the votes. If I'm not the right person to sit in for Tharaka, and she's from Tharaka, she's part and parcel of the blame she's trying to pass. Because she voted for me, having presented myself, and she said, I am the best of the best. Because everybody was good anyway. So this is the best of the best. And at the end of the day, what worries me is, and what I'm grappling with, and I'm sure it's across the country. Yeah. She says there is money in the country. Nobody has shown us where that money is. I agree, crooks are the corrupt characters who possibly pay for government money or do other things that are unwelcome should face the law. We cannot relent on that. We cannot forgive them. However, we also need to be told where this other money is going to be, because when I go to Tharaka,
yes,
the question is, why are our roads bad? Why don't we have water? How come electricity is scarce? How come our schools are not well done? And I have to answer by saying, and it's unfortunate, that the government may not have money to do these things. If the government had money to do these things, we should be told where the money is. Yeah. And when we're going to try to raise the money, as we were trying to do with the finance bill, then it was struck off. It suffered a natural death. The net effect is we now have to relook at means and ways of raising the money, and that's why we have to do supplementaries.
All right. And Honorable Murugara, if you are to raise that fundamental question as a parliamentarian, probably at the floor of the National Assembly, because you have that privilege, according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, which is the single largest source of economic data and indicators, there does not seem any major public project initiated by the government almost 2 years. The Exchequer has struggled to release funds for key services, including education and devolution. He talked about that. The pending bill menace continues with people lacking capital because of the crisis. Would it not be fair then for you to point this question and ask probably where exactly is our money ending up?
60% of it is on recurrent. Absolutely. And another a bigger one, not bigger than that, but it could be about 30%. On consolidated
fund services,
which is debts. You're left with 10%. 10%, even if I did what is it likely to do? Try to finish the old stored road from Chakariga to Maribanti, try to finish that institution or whatever, which we had pledged, and it's over. That is the problem. So we need a lot more, such that the 10% is higher than what we have today. We also have to move quickly and deal with the consolidated services so that these debts are paid and we get relief. The 10% starts increasing, the 30% starts going down. We also have to devise, it's painful, it's extremely painful what to do with the 60%, because these are citizens who are working for the government. They have to be paid. And the other knee also, the government must be the highest reliever on employment. That's why even when there is a blockade on employing, the government has to go around it. Sometimes breach that blockade and try to employ, because there are youngsters out there who require jobs, and any available opportunity they should actually get.
All right.
So we have all this as a problem.
Yeah, let's sample the feedback. And Diana and Franklin, I'll come to you, because the dispatch from Cabinet yesterday, the first since the broad-based government or the broad-based cabinet with that outlook was formed, there was significant developments regarding ghost workers, including at State House. So it's an issue we can talk about when we get back from sampling the feedback. And here's what you are saying. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Gabi Wakasiaka says there is no room for judicial activism. The acting Inspector General Masengeli is going nowhere. He is there to serve. Let the judiciary first kick out the corrupt judges, then we can talk from there. As how it says, our leaders disobeying the rule of law is retrogressive. The very The very laws that give them power can strip it away by fostering lawlessness in high offices. They set dangerous precedent, yet expect citizens to comply. This hypocrisy threatens our democracy.
Correct.
Mukuu says what Honorable Murugara is evading is the fact that the court does not institute matters on its own. It is the same for the people challenging this government project, and it's upon the AG to represent the government and illustrate the people's will. Frank Orinde says it's about what the people want, as Murugara puts it. Then what happened to our views on the housing levy? Why did the government implement it against our wishes, if speaking from both sides of the mouth was a person? Jim Rose says it's unfortunate to watch Honorable Murugara lying on national TV, defending the government which cannot obey court orders, abductions, killings, and others. Okello Mwalimu says a regime that's obsessed with anarchy and arrogance has no moral authority to implement the same laws it so passionately breaks. This regime has terribly failed to restore public trust in our governance system. The president must do everything possible to restore our trust. Engineer Lazaro says disobeying court orders by the same person who is supposed to enforce the law portraying Kenyans negatively. And Sir Nixon Degure says it's sad that we have leaders who tend to assume that our judges are doing guesswork. A judge can't have any preferred outcome in any particular matter or case. The judge's only obligation, and its solemn obligation, it's the rule of law.
Correct.
Dixon Oluoch says it's sad to hear a legislator defending ills of the executive, the first people who should question the executive by summoning the National Police Service. The Cabinet Secretary Interior, Professor Kithure Kindiki, and Masengeli are protecting them. Our MPs do not understand their roles for sure. Your final comments. Diana, starting with you yesterday, the dispatch from Cabinet is what I'm looking at, and there are some interesting developments that came out of that dispatch from the Cabinet, and this including major government actions that will be taken. And to just get where the numbers were yesterday are specified by my colleague Stephen Leto in the report, which largely talked about ghost workers, including at State House. And Honorable Murugara talked about how the current expenditure is having a toll on our revenues as well. So, I mean, it takes a good decision maker, is it, and a visionary leader at that, to pluck out all this, because the president equally and the deputy president voiced this concern during the wage bill conference at the Bomas of Kenya.
Yes, thank you very much. The dispatch from Cabinet, the first since the Cabinet.
Oh, you mean the broad-based?
That one, after that was supposed to respond to the Gen Z concerns, but clearly didn't. First, what is good is the first attempt to focus on the real issues of accountability within the public and civil service. That is laudable, and the attempts to ensure that we are not retrogressing when it comes to access to health through Linda Mama, though it is it is lip service, because the social health insurance, as has been analyzed by experts, is likely to deepen inequality and get us back to where we are.
Okay, yes,
is this the most tactical? I said here that a government that forgets its people and the blood they carry has lost the vehicles of statehood. For this particular dispatch not to have addressed the killings and the abductions, which the Kenya Kwanza government committed to ensuring that they would not happen under them, is problematic and quite unfortunate for them. In addition to all these issues of hustler, the biometric for human resource audit, the issue of all the contracts and the whistleblowing that has been brought forward on issues of social accountability for current contracts, ongoing contracts, is something that should have been given a little bit more weight. But for them to have started with this at the beginning, maybe now the committee of Honorable Murugara will be more active in engaging with EACC. We'll see more people prosecuted, cleaning up the human resource.
Yeah, thank you.
Shouldn't be difficult at all,
yes,
because recommendations had already been made by various people, including the Institute for Economic Affairs.
Yeah.
Biometric, very, very fast. And they have our data already. They do not need Maisha number to clean up.
Thank you.
There is a payroll, civil servants, they are not vetted when getting ID because we need their biometrics. They are really our people. It should be very easy to clean.
Yeah.
Why has it taken this long?
Yes,
it should not be the grand announcement.
It's good to see that after the turmoil of the recent few months, the cabinet's now settled down to work. They start elite settlement by the big boys and girls again. So we hope that they will continue to serve Kenyans, and it's laudable when they sit down to transact important matters like the cabinet dispatch we saw yesterday. But on the issue of wage bill and ghost employees, I agree with Diana that it's a lot of paying lip service to this. If you look at the actual problem, it's actually bloating, and the bloating is happening from the political appointments. There are positions I don't want to mention, but you saw there was only one government spokesperson under Honorable Mwai Kibaki. We have 1 and 3 deputies, and then you have others in State House that are duplicity. And then we didn't do a very good job in terms of the transition from the previous regime to the devolved system. What the Constitution said was different from what we did with the provincial administration. So there's a lot of duplicity, and that is it. And if we really have the political will to do this, we'll do it. But because these are the politicians' people, they need to be put somewhere. And that's the problem that we have. We have to be clear on this. I also hoped that Honorable Murugara, if you have any influence in that regard, the cabinet should begin really discussing proper allocations to IEBC. Registration of voters is a key thing. Issuance of IDs is a key issue. And young people want to hear those things. So those are priorities we want to hear from such a country.
Thank you so much. And that's very important what he said. But we have said we must also adhere to the rule of law. And when we say this from the other side, you say that's a lie, it is not true, it's defending the government. Remember, the reason why we don't have an IBC today is because of a pending court case. It was determined the other day. I hope nobody goes to the High Court and everywhere else to stop the recruitment of the commissioners so that we are able to move. If the courts are going to stop the recruitment, then we have to do without IBC, no recruitment, no delimitation, no nothing. And that is the truth. However painful it is, it's not a lie. That's number one. Number two, I don't think we have any ghost workers who are political appointees. Those aren't ghosts. They are known. They have some offices somewhere. As to their validity of being where they are, that's a question for another day. But the ghost workers we have who were analyzed are real people who do not work, who are recruited for ulterior motives with a view to possibly gobbling government money. And those responsible should be brought to book. As we clean the payroll, we also get those who did it, because these are crimes which we've talked about and which must be stopped by the government, prevented, and the people prosecuted.
Thank you.
So at the end of the day, I look forward to seeing how, number one, Parliament is going to be, now that we have the broad-based government. Remember, we were on the party lines. I don't know how the party lines are going to be. Number two,
thank you.
I think the executive has started well. And there's going to be harmony, in my view. Whether we call Raila Odinga a big boy or not, the fact remains he has the interest of the people at heart.
Thank you.
The president, too, has the interest of the people at heart. Parliament now will have possibly to redefine itself on how it does its business.
Time will tell. And just fact-checking, and as we finish up, the High Court gave the Nelson Makanda team the go-ahead, the selection panel, before NADCO. You guys had a sitting at the Bomas of Kenya. So the problem was political, not the courts. Good morning. Thank you. Honorable George Murugara is the MP representing Tharaka constituency, as well as the chair of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee of the National Assembly, an advocate of the High Court as well. Thank you. Diana Gishengo, the national coordinator, the Institute of Social Accountability. Thank you as well. Franklin Mukwanja, thank you as well. The executive director, the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, always having you here to better our democracy. and to inform our viewers as well. Asante sana. Thanks as well for waking up with us here on the broadcast. Up next is Safina Chiegoma with Health and Lifestyle. Till then, good morning.